Today we've got a guest who's not only spicing up kitchens worldwide, but also serving up the secrets to online content creation success. Chef Zee is the culinary mastermind behind irresistible, traditional Hispanic recipes that you may have seen on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. From Dominican delights to Cuban classics, Chef Z's got the secret sauce to bring a taste of Latin flavor straight to your plate. Oh, but wait, Chef Z isn't just a whiz in the kitchen. She's also a savvy entrepreneur who's mastered the business of content creation, and she's dishing out her top tips and tricks for turning her passion for food into a thriving online empire. Hello, Xenia. Welcome to the podcast. I am so happy to see you. I'm so excited to catch up with you, and I'm so excited for you to tell the audience about yourself, kind of how you got into content creation, then your journey through this thing. I know a little bit about it, but refresh my memory and tell me kind of how you got here and what you were doing before and what you're doing now.
Okay, no, perfect. Well, first off, Miss Tony, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here. I love any opportunity that I get to just catch up with you and just talk about the journey because it is always evolving. It's always changing. Um, I kind of jumped into this. I've been doing this for a really long time. I've been doing this since college before YouTube was a thing. I was sharing my recipes online. Oh, also for those who don't know, I'm Xenia, also known as Chef Z, and I'm a food content creator. I focus primarily on cooking videos and cooking tutorials and really cooking comfort food in a very approachable way, especially for people who may be learning how to cook or don't necessarily feel comfortable in the kitchen, or for those seasoned cooks who just want something quick and easy. Um, it started that way. It has evolved into something a little bit more, which I'm sure we'll get into today. But I started off just, regular little Tumblr blog, sharing my recipes in college, sharing what I was cooking in college because there's not much you can do with just like a rice cooker and a hot plate, which I wasn't supposed to have, but I snuck in anyways. And then I actually majored in media production and screenwriting. So I've
Oh,
always been a storyteller, and it's always been a passion of mine. And then I started to notice, over the years, that there weren't a lot of people who look like me. And what I mean by that is, as a Hispanic woman and an Afro Latina, it was just the Hispanic community is very diverse, and I just didn't see a lot of creators who look like me. And at the time, that wasn't even a term. Like influencer or creator, like wasn't a thing. And then more importantly, it was just that Caribbean food space, which is one that I occupy. And I mean this as nicely as possible. Like there just wasn't good quality content that was being put out that really celebrated the types of foods that I grew up with. And I was really passionate about that because you couldn't tell me nothing about my grandmother's cooking. Okay. It's the best
yeah.
thing in the world. You couldn't tell me anything about Caribbean food. It was like the best thing. And then everything is second to that. And so, knowing that I had this production background, knowing that I knew how to manipulate lighting, that I knew my camera setting, I was just like, you know what? I want to really put the foods that I grew up eating on a pedestal. And I wanted to give it just
Mhm.
that like hero food porn treatment. And at the time, Made to Order was born, which is a fun fact that a lot of people who have been following me kind of miss. Is that Chef Z Cooks, the name of my YouTube channel, was one that the audience
Mhm.
actually gave me. Um,
Oh,
so
I didn't
originally
know
it was
that.
called Originally, it was Made to Order, and because my real name throws a lot of people off, it starts with an X. They nicknamed me Z, which was fine because again, that was a nickname I'd also had grown up playing sports. It was one that I was used to, and so
Hmm.
the audience, when they would reference my channel, they would reference it as like Chef Z Cooks, not the actual name of the channel. So I
Right.
was like, okay, branding 101, wrong name for the channel. So I just, when I changed the name to the channel, no one realized because they had already been calling it that.
Hmm.
So we got started, I want to say in 2016. And when I say we, I say my husband and I, because we started the channel together.
Right.
He also has a production background as well. So we're two like just film nerds
Hmm.
making content together. We started in 2016 and it's been a wild ride since. It went from a blog to a YouTube channel, and it's still a YouTube channel, but now it's very heavily more so on social media, and it's also
Mhm.
evolving into like a boutique production company of sorts. Um, so that's a
Wow.
it's a little background.
Wow. That is a lot. And I met you through YouTube,
Hmm.
and uh, I was bowing down to you because, you know, being someone who creates content about food is a woman after my own heart. As you know, I was a personal chef for years,
Hmm.
and I tried. That was my first idea about content creation in business. This was back, like I said, YouTube had just started, and I was like, maybe I could do cooking instructions, cooking lessons,
Hmm.
because people are always asking me how to make this and how to make that
Hmm.
online. And man, I'm telling you, a couple of months after trying to cook and then film and then I was like, I can't. Even just for the blog,
Hmm.
taking photos of food is extremely difficult. It was back
Hmm.
then. I mean, now we've got a lot better equipment and lighting and tripods that bend
Hmm.
all kinds of different ways. Back then, it was so hard to grab even a good photo of the food. So
Hmm.
I, my hats off to you. And also, uh, the recipes that you show and the recipes that I've tried that you've made have been incredible. So you're
Thank you, thank you.
multi-talented. You've got production, you've got stage presence, camera presence, you've got cooking. What is it that you don't do is a question. So
Um,
how
I
how
sew. I don't
how
sew.
you don't sew?
I
Okay.
don't sew. And I say that because I'm missing curtains in the house and they're so expensive. And I was like, I need to learn how to sew.
Add that to your repertoire. Well, I know you had a passion behind all of this, but when
Mhm,
did you get an idea that this could actually create some kind of an income for you?
mhm. I would say I got it a year in. So the first year, I think we celebrated 100 subscribers and we were over the moon. We were just, we were over the moon. And a production company actually approached us and they wanted to license our videos to play like at the supermarket. You know how sometimes you
Mm,
go grocery shopping and sometimes like maybe in the produce section they'll just have like a cooking video
mm-hmm.
playing. It's like the equivalent of like elevator music for like grocery stores, for example.
Oh, okay.
So they had approached us and they wanted to license our videos for 3 months. And so for every quarter, they would select a couple of videos and they would license them. And then if they wanted to license them for another quarter, we would renegotiate another fee. And that was the first time, and that was only a year into it. And that was the first time that we realized that, this has legs, like there's something there. And in particular,
Mm,
what they were after was the quality of our production, the quality of our videos. And the fact that we used to have this philosophy of the food is a star and I'm just a pair of hands,
mm,
and
mm,
so it was a lot of like really spending a lot of time like lighting these bell peppers perfectly, which was why, we were first approached by grocery store chains and stuff like that to like put our videos. And so that's when we started to realize like, okay, there's something here. And then we just kind of kept going with it. And admittedly, and this is what not to do. This is what not to do. I actually handicapped my own videos and my own business for a couple of years in the beginning by not monetizing them properly, simply because
oh,
I didn't, I wanted to retain ownership. For me, it was about the artistry. I didn't want to
mm-hmm.
relinquish control. And then it wasn't until I got a little bit smarter about it and I kind of opened and I like loosened the reins a little bit that the floodgates opened. And
Oh,
then I
okay.
would say probably within since COVID, because again, we were always as you know, filming food videos hasn't gotten much easier. Um, and it is a beast in and of itself. Sometimes I think that we're crazy for working with like a live product that is food, that
Mm-hmm.
you can't cheat it not looking good. You can't cheat if it's overcooked
Mm-mm.
or undercooked. You have to be really on it. And during COVID, we revamped our recording studio. And again, that was like another like phase where we realized when everyone else was shut down and we weren't, because we were sheltered at home where we filmed in a recording studio. That's when it was just like this person wanted to license this brand deal, this brand wanted to do this and this and this, and yeah, then it got crazy.
Wow. So tell me more about the not wanting to monetize. Are you speaking of what type of monetization are you talking about? Were you hesitant to get into?
In early on, I would say that I was a terrible salesperson. And
Mm-hmm.
I just was like really bad at being like, so and so sent me this. And if you click the link, you can get like 15% off. Or I was really bad about receiving product in exchange for a review. I
Okay.
really wanted it to be authentic. I really wanted it to be, I had this mindset where if I wasn't already using it, I didn't want to promote it. So I was
Mm-hmm.
effectively closing myself off from trying new things by having that mentality. And then I also didn't want to bombard my audience with constantly selling them things.
I
And
see.
a part of that was because I also just didn't have, I just was not well versed or experienced in how to incorporate brands seamlessly or sponsor content into the actual content. Like there is an art to doing it where it's
Mm-hmm.
seamless and it doesn't feel like a disruption to the content. It doesn't feel like it's just like an ad play. And I just didn't care to learn, didn't care. I didn't want to be a sellout. You know what I mean? Like I felt very strongly about brands that I wouldn't work with, because it's just like they're not products that I use in my everyday cooking. So then why would I put
Right.
them in a video? And again, it was a very small way of thinking, because I think I was thinking very much in a specific category, not knowing that the possibilities were endless, and like these categories are
Mm-hmm.
very, very vast. And ever since like I
Yes.
changed my perspective on that, oh, it's been a game changer. It's been to the point where I look back and I just wish someone would have sat me down earlier and told me how silly I was being and how much I was
Well,
getting in my own way. Because not every activation is like a here's a coupon code, here's 15% off. And some of
yeah.
the best ones have been new products that I have been exposed to because brands have approached me. And next thing you know, I'm like, oh my goodness, I would promote this for free.
Well, there's no way to, I mean, you can't beat yourself up about that because, like I tell people, this whole social media business is still the Wild West. And you just
Hmm.
didn't know. I mean, there's no way to know all the different types of activations out there. And it's still today,
Hmm.
I'm learning about new ones every single day. It's like, you want us to do what?
Hmm.
So it's nothing to feel bad about, but I understand your hesitancy about quote unquote being a sellout or feeling like you're constantly selling to your audience, even though I'm pretty sure you were given tons and tons of free, valuable content. And
Hmm.
it's a balance of the two.
Hmm.
So when you first started working with brands, did you, and you mentioned this, you touched on this a little bit, like having brands reach out to you that maybe didn't 100% align with your business goals or your
Hmm.
values. Did you struggle with that at all, or did you have a hard time saying no, or did that even happen? Were you approached by brands that you just didn't have a good alignment with?
Yes. So I would say in the beginning, and even it's a little different now, but in the beginning, I said no to probably 95% of the brands that would approach me, simply because I didn't want to deal. I didn't want to deal with the brand brief. I didn't want someone telling me what to do. I didn't want someone telling me how to frame my shots. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want it to be, sometimes you look at the brief and it felt very commercial heavy. It didn't feel authentic to me. I had also had some like bad experiences where you wouldn't get paid on time. And for me, it just like wasn't worth the headache.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized also in taking your master class, and just also speaking to like other creators and asking them like how do they navigate these like brand relationships? Because I felt like
Mm-hmm.
I had really grown something very special. I had grown a following of over 200K and I wasn't doing sponsorships. I was saying no left
Mm-hmm.
and right. And I was saying like, oh, I don't need this. And I just again felt like I felt like something wasn't clicking. And so I
Mm-hmm.
realized that I could that I needed to strike a balance. I can stay true and authentic to my brand goals and my value, my brand ethos while still working with brands. And I could also work with
Mm-hmm.
brands that I love. Like no one says that I have to work with a brand that I don't necessarily like care for.
Yeah.
I can still say no to that, but I don't have to say no to all
Mm-hmm.
of them simply because I'm
Right.
afraid that that the deliverables are going to be too demanding, or simply looking at a brand brief and saying, oh, that's going to cost a fortune, they'll never pay. Well, girl, ask and see what they say. Like
Yeah.
you can't just
Yeah.
like turn it away and just say, oh no, it's not gonna, you and that's really what would change. And now again, now I have some of the best time collaborating
Yeah.
with brands. Hmm.
Well, that was a lesson learned. It's interesting because a lot of creators that I talk to, they want to start creating the content and they're like already like, I can't wait till I can work with a brand, and they have no idea what that's like. And it's just a little bit different that you were like, no, I'm building my audience and I'm going to
Hmm.
really kind of take my time getting into these other brand deals. So you mentioned that you were doing production work
Hmm.
early on. Was there any other way that you were monetizing early
Hmm.
on when you first got started in a way to bring in some money or
Yeah.
to, kind of supplement what you were doing?
So early on, the way that because I was not doing brand deals and I wasn't doing sponsorships, that was a revenue stream that just was non-existent. So what my husband and I were doing is that we were actually operating a boutique production company. And so because we both came from an advertising background, we had some existing relationships from agencies that we had worked at prior. We would cold call and cold email, believe it or not, and we curated a portfolio. So we use our
Oh,
YouTube
okay.
channel as a portfolio. We used the blog as well as some of the still photography that we were capable of doing. We also had sizzle reels of things that just you didn't see public, that weren't public facing, and we would
Mm-hmm.
actually
Mm-hmm.
sell our work and our portfolio to clients. And so for a very long time, we did a lot, and I mean a lot of private work for brands, which is so hilarious because on the on the creator side, I was so against it. And I was like, no, no, I don't think I can do working with brands. No. But meanwhile, we had a production company where the clients were
Mm-hmm.
arguably a little bit more difficult to work with because you're creating their ads that are going to be running on their owned and operated websites. I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I did a lot of work with Shark Ninja and a lot of their like pressure cookers and like air fryers. And
Mm-hmm.
we produce a lot of their formal tutorials on how to operate their machines, like how to clean it, how to, what the proper settings are, like a lot of like those user manuals. So for years, that's what we did. That's what paid the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And it was no it was it wasn't a coincidence that the reason that we were able to focus so much time and energy on our production company was because we also had a different mindset as to how we were tackling our social media stuff. So, and what I mean
Mm-hmm.
by that is that we used to say the food is the star and I'm strictly a pair of hands. And so
Mm-hmm.
because yes, I had an online presence, but for me it was always like, oh no, 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 no. It's that beautiful cut of flank steak with the marble. That's the star. That's the star. And as our audience started to grow, they're like, yeah, the food's the star, but we're kind of here for you too. And when that shift
Mm-hmm.
happened in the audience, I could no longer be a pair of hands. I could no longer just be a
Oh
pair
my
of hands. Like
goodness.
the demand was too strong. And even that I resisted for a long time. And I struggled with that because I'm an extremely private person. And I remember even telling you years ago saying like, I don't, I'm not built for this. Like I just want to cook and like turn off the camera, make beautiful
Yes.
photos, make beautiful videos. And people wanted to know about my life. I'm like, what is there to know? Like, I'm a homebody who likes to cook and who likes to eat, and I need to lay off the carbs for a couple more weeks. That's my,
No.
like, that was my life. So when our audience shifted and the demand from our audience also started to shift, and there was a bigger demand for me to be more on camera more, and when there was also a demand for me to be more forward facing in addition to the food, suddenly the production work that we were doing privately was not as lucrative as some of the things that we could be doing, with me, I guess like finally embracing like, hey, you're a creator, you've built this audience, like you kind of have to
Hmm.
show up, like you have to be a little bit
Yeah.
more dimensional, like you're more than just like a pair of hands, like you're more than just like this moral and pestle that you keep showing, like they actually want to see you with the moral and pestle.
Yes.
um so that's where from a monetization standpoint we had to kind of shift from the production company and start figuring out how to incorporate brand activations and change our approach because again we got bills to pay. It's something we can't,
Right.
you have to replace one income with another because suddenly
Hmm.
when your audience starts to shift too, you can't ignore that either and just say like, because at the same time I am using the portfolio that I'm building for this audience as ways to get leads for my production company. So it was one of those things that was intertwined but also kind of had to like shift a little, and the whole time like the audience was calling the shots. So
That's the audience calls the shots. I need to have a t-shirt that says the audience calls the shots because that's what's happened. And this has been a whole theme through several of the interviews I've done. Some of them I haven't even posted yet, but
Mhm,
about coming out in front of the camera, like
mhm,
not wanting to um, do your business on social media without just showing your work
mhm,
and without showing yourself. And
mhm,
every single time, the creators who said, and then when I finally got in front of the camera, it just
mhm,
took off.
mhm,
And actually, was having a conversation with a content strategist, and she was saying that it's because people want to know who they're doing business with.
mhm,
It's great that the product looks good, the food looks good, you have talent doing XYZ, but when they see the face behind the brand,
mhm,
that's when they really become loyal, that's when they really become more engaged, that's when
mhm,
they consider you. The social media is so different from old media. New media is different from old media in a way that before, let's just say, and I don't even know if you can identify with this, but years ago, before social media, and me in the audience, I'm being sold some potato chips by an actress on
mhm.
television. That actress is so, I mean, I'll never see
Yeah.
them, I'll never talk to them, I'll never
Mhm,
have a chance to text, I mean, call them on.
mhm,
It's just, no, you don't have any connection with that. But
mhm,
with the social media, you can find the creator on a different platform. I can find you on TikTok, I can find you on
mhm,
Instagram, I can comment on your post, and guess what, you could possibly comment back to me, and that makes the audience member feel so special and so seen and so
mhm,
heard. And therefore, yeah, they're like, I'm there for everything that girl does. I am
mhm.
there for it because I feel like I know her. So I'm really amazed how this theme just keeps happening over and over again when people start talking about getting in front of the camera, especially when we're in this time right now where there's a lot of big push for faceless channels, faceless
Yeah,
content.
it's very interesting. I have noticed that there is a push for faceless content. It's something that once I had my come to Jesus moment, that I had to just show myself more on camera. Something as silly as like, and not silly because it's very impactful, but something
Yeah.
as easy as like putting my face on my thumbnails. Again, it's one of those things that I can only speak to creating food content because it's what I do
Mm-hmm.
day to day. But
Mm-hmm.
specifically with food, it's one of those things when I realize, like, okay, I am sharing recipes that I hope people will then try at home and share with their friends and their
Mm-hmm.
family. Something that you put into your body. Why am I going to trust someone who won't even show themselves eating on camera? Like, there's a disconnect there. And when I
Yeah.
realized, I'm like, what are you doing? You have this all backwards. You know what I mean? Like, it was just one of those things where it was like, and I had my reasons for not wanting to eat on camera. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that is that, like, I genuinely love food. I'm not a pretty eater. I'm going to take a big old bite and we're going to grub. We're going to eat. We're like, this is what we do. And I hated the look of me, like, just chewing on camera. But then
I can imagine.
it's one of those things where it's like, the chances of someone being as equally as passionate about food is probably watching your video right now and is not going to care that you did not take a princess sized bite out of your food that you're saying is so delicious. Just eat on camera and
Right.
just lean into it, embrace it. And it's one of those things where now where I see there is a little bit more push for faceless content, simply because I think it's easier to produce. And you can produce a lot more of it faster. And when you are creating content on like TikTok or Instagram, it's more, faster, faster, faster. So I can understand
Mm-hmm.
that. But from like a food content perspective, I don't see me going backwards where I would not be showing myself at the very least taking a bite, enjoying a bite, or even just actually cooking and like even just showing that, mistakes do happen in the kitchen. Lean into it, roll with the punches. Um, Again, very, very interesting. I don't know.
It
Again, I
is.
always just find it silly that I used to have all these hangups, and now I just like I might as well like put the napkin under my under my chin these days because now I don't have those hangups anymore. Now I'm like, we're gonna get dirty. Let's go. Wash your hands. We're about to eat.
The more you do it, the more comfortable you get.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
have always said I don't like to be in front of the camera, but you know what? Oh, I don't like the face I was making. I don't like the way my eyes are looking. I don't like, and really we're our toughest critics.
Hmm.
Nobody really cares. They're getting the the meat of the content from you, and they're
Hmm.
getting what is you're attempting to give to them, what your goal is. And so
Hmm.
how you're looking on camera or how you may appear is less and less of a problem, especially if you just get used to it. Just get used to getting in
Hmm.
front of the camera. Just do it. Is what I tell
Hmm.
some of the people who are just getting started on social media. And I know that because you got the background in production. So
Hmm.
I always say to people, I was like, when you get on camera for the first time, you're gonna suck unless you have a background in
Hmm.
film, in acting, in media. So maybe that wasn't one of your struggles early on.
It was. It was a big struggle. It was a huge struggle because for me, it's like I had a production background, but I wanted to be the next Shonda Rhimes. Like that's what I went to college for.
Oh.
I wanted to write screenplays. I wanted to write series. I wanted to write epics. Food content, food styling. That that, that was different. So it
Hmm.
took dedication to stick with it, and
Hmm.
and I always say like it's the it's the best that I could do at that time, knowing that you're going to evolve. Because even if you look at your portfolio from when you can look at your portfolio even from a year ago and just be like,
Hmm.
oh my goodness, I would never style that dish that way. But in the moment, it's the best that you could do, and it did the job, and it landed. And the important part was that you stuck with it, that you didn't listen to that voice in the back of your head that was like, oh my god, kind of had a little double chin situation when I took that bite, like I don't know, or like oh no, like the cilantro looked a little wilted, like what was I doing,
Yeah,
like they're gonna eat me up alive in the comments. No, just power
it
through,
doesn't
keep
happen.
going. Hmm.
So after being on social media early on, and kind of, I feel like you probably had a steady growth. Was it steady for
Hmm.
you? Or tell me, when what did you do? Were there any changes you had to make? Or there any things that you had to tweak in order to maybe not start seeing growth, but just keep growing? Because that's
Hmm.
what this is all about. It's about
Hmm.
continuing to widen your audience. So tell me
Hmm.
about that.
So I would say my growth in the beginning was pretty steady. It was pretty steady, and then I would say I plateaued and my audience shifted. And
Hmm.
part of that was also because I resisted this. It took me a long time to adapt to the changes that were happening in the landscape. I, when it came to cooking videos, like I was still formatting my videos as though they were going to be on Food Network and not as
Okay.
though they were going to be broken down into snackable content, with all the
Hmm.
hero shots and then put on social media. I think I was still like very much like a purist where I was like, no, this is a cooking
Hmm.
tutorial. They must know every step of the video, and not
Yeah.
understanding that
Yeah.
sometimes people just want to see that fork go into the cheese and it comes out, and like
Hmm.
they're okay. Like it's not about them having to know exactly how to make this dish. And for those people who want to know how to make that dish, there's either going to be a longer form video on the timeline or they can get it on the vlog. So I would say that my growth was steady and then it plateaued. But then once I finally adapted and really embraced more um, of the best practices that you find on social media, then it was just like the floodgates opened. And even currently now, I'm like gasping for air, like asking for help, like looking at my husband, like, I need help. Okay, this is like, I feel like I not that I opened Pandora's box, because that's not what I'm trying to say, but it's one of
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
things where it's like this train is moving at a million miles an hour, and like I don't want it to slow down, but like I needed to slow down just a little bit so I can like get my stuff in order to keep up, because now it's growing to the point where I'm overwhelmed. And I
Hmm.
didn't think that that could still happen having experienced a plateau. Like after having growing steadily and then having a plateau and then kind of having to re-strategize, rethink your approach, and like really do, really have a lot of the hard conversations, and then kind of switch, because you never know when you're switching your approach or when you're switching, or even when you're expanding the type of content that you're producing. You don't know that it's going to hit, because again,
Hmm.
the audience calls the shots, and sometimes
Hmm.
it works and sometimes it doesn't. And when you're in a period of, you've been growing and then you're not, it messes with you. It does.
It
You're
does.
just like, man, I've lost the juice. Like I don't have it anymore. Like, and it's not, it's really not. So you don't. So when you finally like realize that, like, you've kind of have figured out the ingredients that work for your specific brand, your content, and your audience, when you're finally kind of getting them all to align, and then it like takes off again. You're like me right now, where you're just like, okay.
Hey, just wanted to pop in for a quick minute. Fun fact, Chef Z is actually one of the creators I worked with inside my YouTube Growth Masterclass. And I have a big announcement. The YouTube Growth and Income Accelerator coaching and course is now open for enrollment. If you're a creator who is already monetized on YouTube but looking to take your channel to the next level to get more subscribers, more views, and make more money, you should apply. Click on the link that's in the description. So,
Mhm.
are you still flying solo, or do you have help?
Well, it's still my husband and I, and it's more myself now than it was, because my husband actually went
Uh,
back to work. Um, he's back in
okay.
corporate, but I do
Mm-hmm.
have a brand manager. So she goes out. So
Okay.
after going from not doing any brand deals, I now have a brand manager, and I joke and I call her the boss,
Mm-hmm.
because she,
Yeah.
keeps us booked and busy. And now,
Yeah.
and what's great with her is that there's a whole other component to my content that I think that we're tapping into. That's part of the reason why I'm overwhelmed. And part of it is that it's in another language. So my content is also bilingual.
Oh.
So there's like parallel audiences, so you kind of have like
Uh-huh.
your, I have an audience that's like very much like first generation American, but then I have another
Hmm.
audience that like they're in another country and they speak Spanish, and it's like, hey, we're here too, what's kind of going on? And the great thing with my brand manager is that she speaks both languages, so she gets us opportunities in both
Oh,
languages.
that's
And so
amazing.
it's become it's become a little bit tricky, where initially my husband, when we switched from the production company and we hired the brand manager, things were doing really well, but we needed more steady income. So he went back to work,
Uh-huh.
and then we started to kind of refocus everything and kind of restructure everything at Chef Z. And then working with the brand manager just within a year, it's one of those things where I question, I'm like, oh, if we would have stuck it out a few more months, my husband would
I
not
know.
be back, because he
I
can't
know.
just, you can't just like leave a team,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
have to tread lightly with that. But we're thankfully
Hmm.
now again back at a point where it's like we need editors who can edit in two different languages. Um,
Whoa.
we need a food stylist. I do a lot of we do everything in house. We do the food styling
Uh-huh.
in house, even if it's like a kitchen assistant, because after a 10-12 hour shoot, guess who's doing the dishes? This girl right here. And my
Oh
husband
my
as well.
goodness, I can't
So I'm like,
imagine.
yeah, even if something as simple as like a kitchen assistant would
Uh-huh.
make all the difference. And that's some of the conversations that we're having right now, is scaling the business to be able to hire those people, because I'll be completely transparent. Those costs of having someone on payroll like scare me. Because
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like financially we're good right now and we can afford it, but then what happens if things slow down? Like I then
Yes.
have to have
It's
like
very
that
tricky.
difficult conversation of either cutting someone's hours, or, and so it's one of those things where, as a business owner, it's a current growing pain. It's one of those things where it's like, I've never done this before. So I have to figure, I have to, tap my network, ask for advice, ask like how to do it, because it's 1000% fear. We have a need and we can satisfy the need. I'm just scared that of having someone be dependent, and then what if I
Right.
can't provide? And then I have to disappoint. And the last thing I want to do is disappoint. But it's also one of those things where, again, it's just like, get out of your own head, because you're also
Yes.
getting in your own way. Because at the same time, it's like you identify the fact that you have a need and that you can fulfill that need, but you're giving yourself all the excuses to not work as efficient as you can. And you already know how to solve the problem.
Yes.
So it's one of those like,
Yeah.
it's the hamster wheel that I'm on right
It is
now.
a hamster wheel. And it's almost like a stair step. I'm trying to envision this because I'm dealing with the same thing with Raven Elise TV, where,
Mm-hmm,
we had a part time person and we're kind of afraid to do that. And it's like, no, they really need to be full time. But are we going to have enough for them to do? Like, we're going to pay you a full time salary, but is it going to be worth it? And then
mm-hmm,
quickly, that person's duties were, yeah, they were doing full time plus some. Well, we need to hire another person. But it's like, you're you're taking a leap of faith to, I may eat into my profits a little bit to hire this
mm-hmm,
person, but this person is going to help us get to that next level income wise.
mm-hmm,
And then the next thing happens, like, oh well, then I started making a little bit more, but now I'm going to eat into it again with this hire.
mm-hmm,
And it you just have to have a plan and faith that you're going to keep growing. And it's
mm-hmm,
very, and I think just in business in general, it's very hard for small businesses to scale. Scaling
mm-hmm,
is difficult because it requires investing resources
mm-hmm,
that may be a little iffy at the time. Investing
mm-hmm.
resources where you're like, dang, I just started making this money. Now I gotta give it to somebody else. I mean, it was the same way when we hired the editor. It's like, you're going to charge us
Mm-hmm,
how much to edit a video? And we could
mm-hmm.
not live without our editors. we don't even look at
Hmm.
that invoice. It's like, how would we make content if we didn't
Yeah.
have these editors? Because we're doing more and we're leveling up and we're trying to get to that next level.
Hmm.
So I totally understand that. And my question was going to be, and I think you answered it, like, when do you know it's time to get help, to hire a team
Oh,
member? And you think you said, when you get overwhelmed, or what were you saying?
yeah. When I get overwhelmed, when I just look at my husband across, we're sitting, when we're late night on the couch and we've been waiting forever and a day to watch our favorite TV shows together, and I'm watching the TV, but I'm also on the computer and I'm trying to edit, and he's like, "Babe, did you see that?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He's like, "What just happened? Can you rewind that? I'm sorry." And then it's just like you feel like you're not present, and then you're overwhelmed, and then
Mm-mm.
you know that you have a 7 a.m. call time the next day for another shoot, and then you just, you know, I think for me is when personally, when I feel like I'm not giving each of the different hats that I wear 100%, when I'm not showing up as my
Okay.
best self in the different roles
Mm-hmm.
that I do, that's when it's, when it's like, when I feel like rush, when I feel like I just have to get through this to get to the next task. And it's just like, well,
Mm-hmm.
you can have someone whose sole responsibility is to focus on these groups of tasks so that you can
Mm-hmm.
do X, Y, and Z to your full capacity, and then not feel like, oh, I could have really given that photo shoot for XYZ dish like another hour because, oh man, I didn't get enough action shots, or I was afraid to, I only cooked enough to take one shot or one series of like vignettes,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really make enough because I was short on time, and that's when it's like, well, why were you short on time? Was it
Right.
because, you know what I mean? Like, why were you short on time? Was it because you were rushing to do? Because at the end of the day, it's you are producing this content, and
Right.
that should be your focus. Like all the ancillary stuff, like find help. And that's where we are. I
Yes.
feel like I have to be at three places at once. But when I'm in those three places, I'm not really there. I'm worried about,
You're
well,
not.
I have to be this place afterwards. And
And
that's not a,
sometimes,
mhm.
no, go ahead.
I was saying, and that's not a fun place to be.
Mm-mm. And sometimes it's not even a matter of, I was going to say, um, my rule of thumb is when you can, only do the things that only you can do,
Hmm.
which is Xenia showing up in front of the camera, cooking the food. Maybe not even the cooking the food, but showing up in front of the camera is
Hmm.
that's what you can do. All this other stuff can be outsourced to someone else. And
Hmm.
so maybe it is also about, and when you're hiring someone, it's to free you up to allow you to do
Hmm.
that. And I can understand what you're saying. It's like when you're not doing the best job, when it's like I can do this and I can do that, but
Hmm.
because I'm so pulled, stretched uh, thin, I can't do the
Hmm.
best job.
Hmm.
So sometimes hiring that help is just about, it may not even be about, look, for content creation, sometimes it's about, well, I could produce more content if I
Hmm.
had someone doing this, this, and this. Sometimes it's not just about the more content. Sometimes it's about, I can just be better. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
about, um, you know, relieving stress so that you
Hmm.
don't quit. Because if you quit, the whole thing goes to heck. And
Yeah.
that leads me to my next question about burnout. Yes,
Hmm.
burnout can happen when you don't have enough help, but burnout can just also happen just because it's the nature of this industry and the nature of the beast. So, how
Hmm.
have you dealt with burnout or avoided burnout so
Hmm.
that you can keep going?
So, which is funny. So the way that my husband and I have dealt with burnout is we're both super creative, and so we have the bad habit of just like walking away or going dark. And you sometimes without warning. Like sometimes it's like we'll have a stretch of like 6 months of posting, posting, posting on the ground, producing, producing, producing. And then it's one of those things where we're tired of expending this much creative energy. We're burnt out. So we're going to channel this creative energy because it's so hard for both of us to just kind of turn it off. We constantly have to be doing something. And so the way that we dealt with burnout in the past has always been with like home projects or like DIY stuff, or like we just have to destroy something and put it back together that has nothing to do with food. It's one of those things where it's just like, I
Okay.
want to order in, I want someone to cook me food, I want to, go out, I don't want to
Hmm. Hmm.
turn on this. I want to clean the stove and have it be sparkly clean, and I want it to stay that way for
Yes.
however long until I miss it. Like, and I don't even want someone to fry an egg and get no, I
No.
just, kitchen closed, kitchen closed.
Yeah.
And so the way I've dealt with burnout has been like completely going dark, walking away, channeling that creative energy into something else that kind of makes into something else that makes me happy, and then circling back to food when I miss it, which doesn't take long, but still, it's like,
Yeah.
and not the best place. It's one of those things where like it doesn't have to get to that place. Like it doesn't have to get to a place where you don't want to turn the oven on. Like we all get there, like, like that. The time between Christmas and New Year's, I feel like everyone's there, and like that's understandable. But it's one of those things where it's just like, you shouldn't be working yourself to the ground where on like a random Tuesday, you're just like, kitchen closed, that's it. We're doing a better job at not getting there, I would
Avoiding
say.
avoiding
Yeah,
burnout. I
avoiding.
think
Yeah.
that's the like not what you do when you get burnout, but let's try not to get burnout in the first place. And
Hmm.
so it's balance. And so how
Hmm.
do you balance like your personal life with
Hmm.
your content creation and running your business?
So for us, we have a very simple rule, which might change, but it's super simple. We don't work on the weekends. We don't work on weekends. We don't film food content on the weekends. On Sundays, the kitchen's closed, and that's really hard, especially because Sundays are just like typically a really great day just to, number one, film impromptu content because it's family dinner. So it's just like a great organic way to capture something that's going on. It's also, a great time to just post content, whether it's on YouTube or any one of the other platforms. So we started off with just having to be disciplined. Really, what it was is that we needed to be disciplined about setting a boundary as to like, we will
Hmm.
not work on these days. And for us, it was just easy to say the weekend. For us, it was easy to say, we
Hmm.
don't work on the weekends. The weekends are for family. The weekends are for us to be with our nephews, to be here, to be present, because we just felt like, when we're filming, we're filming. These are,
Hmm.
my videos don't take 2 hours to produce. They take
Hmm.
out, they're very, very long shoots. Sometimes they're retakes, sometimes they're multiple days, especially because I film with natural lighting. So in the wintertime, we lose light at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's one of those things where something that might take one day now takes 2 days. And so for us initially, creating that balance it was just easy to say we don't work on the weekends. Now it's changing because now we realize like, well, there's real value, for example, on working on a Sunday. Not simply
Yeah.
because it's work, but because we enjoy it. Because again, it's one of those things where our audience has evolved and what they're asking for has evolved. What I'm willing to share has evolved. I include my mom in my content, and it's really funny because she hates cooking.
Hmm.
So it's really fun just to have her over for dinner on Sundays and just cook together and like watch her commentary, because
Hmm.
even though she does not like to cook, mom is still mom. So mom is like, is that how you
Yes.
really gonna are you really gonna add that much onions to this
Right.
dish? Like, oh my goodness,
Right.
I better get my mouthwash ready. Like, she'll make like her little comment,
Yeah.
and
Funny.
it's fun, and I enjoy doing that. So now what? So instead of just having this like blanket rule of we don't film on the weekends or we don't work on the weekends, it's we need to have one day off social media where the sole purpose is recharging, whether it's
Mm.
we're focusing on the house, whether we're going out, whether we're spending time, we're and it doesn't have to be on the weekend. It can be a Wednesday, it can be, it kind of like rotates. The the
Mm-hmm.
key is to not have to need it. It's to just do it so that you won't have to need it. You're already doing it. It's almost like a form of like self care, but it's just really a boundary because my husband and I were both
Yes.
workaholics. So neither one of us is going to look at each other and tell each other to slow down and to stop. If anything,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're going to tell each other, are you getting tired? Don't worry, I'll take over the driver's seat, and it's just, that's not healthy.
Right.
And we've learned that over the years. We talked about burnout and stuff. And, that's where we get to that point where it's just like, I don't want to see the stove. And again, you shouldn't have to get to that point. So for us, it's just about setting that boundary where even if you don't feel like you need a break, just take the break. Just take, and it's once a week. It's not going to kill you. Because we realized, for us, like doing the weekend was a little, it was nice, but you still felt like you were kind of falling behind. And what we realized too, like just creating the content on the Sunday was more of a for like that impromptu, organic
Right.
moment where it was one of those, I don't want to say less produced for us, where it's like we don't have the studio lights, it's really like turn the camera on and go and see what happens. Um,
See what happens.
and again, yeah, and we've been enjoying that, but that's definitely how we balance it. We just have like an off day, whether or not we feel like we need it, we take it, and like we're not setting up cameras, we're not worried about did this file get transferred. No, no, none of that lingo. It's just we're off. This is mm-hmm.
Those boundaries are so important. It's very difficult for those of us who are entrepreneur entrepreneurs or business owners to shut it off. My brain is always going.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be intentional about it to say, I am not going to go sit in front of my computer. I'm not going to figure out something to do on my phone or my laptop. I'm just going to go and take a break and chill out.
Mm-hmm.
And that break, I think, is what allows us to keep going because there's been cases with the Ravens channel to where we go, and then everybody's just a ball of emotional nerves and crying at the drop of a hat
Mm-hmm.
because it becomes too much.
Yeah.
And then there is the need in this world of content creation to be creative all the time,
Mm-hmm.
especially for you making food content. Food is
Mm-hmm.
creativity, and you wouldn't be in this space if you weren't creative and if you weren't didn't have a lot of creative ideas about food. But even people who are super creative run into roadblocks and mental blocks and creativity
Mm-hmm.
blocks. Does that ever happen to you? And if so, when that happens, what do you do to kind of get those creative juices going again?
It happens to me. It happens to me. I would say over the summer. Over the summer is when it for sure happens to me, and I think it's just because like it's not that I don't like summer foods. It's I'm such a fall food, comfort food. You know, I love the cold weather. So like in the summertime, like I feel like I draw a blank and I'm like, like, what are we eating? What are we eating that's not like just salt and pepper, a little bit of olive oil and toss it on the grill and eat. like, and so usually what I do is I just go in the completely opposite direction. I will and this has worked for me for like the last, I would say, like 6 or so years. I will focus on an area that needs improvement in my culinary skills. So,
Hmm.
and so instead of focusing on like the lack of creativity, I'll say, you know what, like I really should get my bread baking skills up. And then just just in that in and of itself will breed creativity. Suddenly it's like, oh well, I can make this, or maybe my audience will like this. Or for example, I just think about a lot of the foods, because a lot of the foods that I enjoy eating are not necessarily some of the foods that perform well with my audience. My audience is very
Hmm.
much Hispanic and Caribbean, and they may not necessarily care for like Italian cuisine. Well, I love a bowl of
Hmm.
pasta, so I don't know,
Hmm.
so some of the things that I'll do is like I will actually look at some areas that my audience doesn't necessarily like, and I'll figure out like how to make them like it. Like, how do I tweak this recipe? How do I like add a spin to it that maybe, and like it just kind of gets you thinking in the kitchen of like how to develop this or that. So I'll either focus on an area that I know I need to improve on, whether it's baking, whether it's, usually something like oven based, because those are actually not a lot of recipes that I include on my channel. They're hard to film for lighting purposes. Or I'll,
Mm,
look at some recipes that I know won't perform well, and I'll figure out like, what is it that it won't perform well? Like, why won't it perform well? Is there something that I could do? Could I change it up so that it does perform well? So that it is engaging for the audience. And usually, those are like the two avenues that I'll take. It is
that's
frustrating.
those are
It
interesting.
is. It is frustrating at times, to feel like, especially with food, when you feel like I have to make chicken again, and you're like, oh, I've made chicken like a million different ways. Like, how else
Hmm.
can I? But again, you just have to take a step back and kind of. There's always a
I
way.
love
There's
that
always,
approach.
Hmm.
I love that approach. And you mentioned one thing about, like you love pasta and Italian, but your audience is not really here for it. So, how do you balance creating content that you want to make
Hmm.
versus the content that your audience wants to see?
Hmm.
How do you handle that?
This one's tough. This one is tough because it's like, do I make myself happy or do I make my audience happy? Ultimately, you always want to make your audience happy, but you also, I've gotten to the point where I do feel comfortable like letting my audience know sometimes, like, hey guys, this one's for me. Like, so just know, like, as much as I would love to be eating rice and beans every day, like today we're gonna venture off to a different continent and we're gonna try this. Also too, like sometimes it's not that I'll try to bury the content, but it'll be, sometimes I will have like a long stretch of just what I call heavy hitters, where it's just like I've been
Hmm.
hitting the audience hard on things that I know they're gonna absolutely love, but just for me and my own sake, I want to experiment with a different type of dish that has a certain type of color story, whether, because it's going to inform, the food photography and the food styling and like just like the palette, and I'll throw it up. And like at that point, it's not really about the engagement. At that point, it's truly just like a nugget for me. Lately, it's been, you know, not even doing food content at all, but doing like interior design and like home DIY content. And it was like funny because
Hmm.
initially I would share some of that on my main platform, but just in like stories, like not on the feed. And it was just like
Yeah, yeah.
this is, it was just like something that was like for me. And I created like a completely separate account because it was like strictly a hobby. And it's
Hmm.
weird because now the two worlds are kind of converging, where the audience before was like, oh, that's nice, where's the food? We don't care for this paint pot, like, like, oh, fabulous, you learned how to use a nail gun. Not today. Like, talk to me about this air fryer.
Yes.
Like, what are your thoughts? And that was fine. I had a whole other little mini audience that,
Hmm.
we can kind of share those like passions together. But it's always a balancing act. I still revert to what the audience wants to see, and I won't abuse it either, because at the end of the day, it's like the engagement is the lifeline, is the bread and butter to growing your platform, to growing your audience. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I may post a recipe that I know will not do well, but I'm not going to post five in a row. I'm not going to force it onto the audience, because at the end of the day, you spent years building this audience. You know exactly what they like. And if you don't, they will tell you. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's just like, if you want to pivot your audience into something different, like either you're gonna have to create a whole new page like I did to share something that's completely left field, or you're gonna have to slow drip it very slowly over the years and hope that it hits. It may not, especially if you operate in such a niche category like I do. Like I feel like there's niche and then there's whatever mine is. It's like it's a niche within a niche. And it's one of those like, unfortunately, like the hard truth is that what your audience wants to see versus what you want to produce, unfortunately, like the two just don't mesh. And sometimes, you know, in order to make yourself happy, sometimes you do what I have done, which is like, well, I've created like this small little page and we have like this small little community, and that type of content, like the home content that I want to produce, goes there. And we get to, and I'll get my fill there, fine. But on the main page, that has gotten you the success that has gotten you, like you also want to be respectful of that too, and just know that you can't force your own will on them too. You have to kind of think of it almost like a TV channel. You're not gonna, it's not gonna be like Disney Kids, and then all of a sudden you're gonna put Game of Thrones on there. Like, it's just not gonna work.
No,
It's just not gonna
no,
work. So you have to like
it's
toe
not
that
gonna work.
line. Yeah, you have to like
You're right.
you have to toe that line, because at the same time too, it still needs to be, even though it is authentic to you, because usually that's where you kind of get that turmoil, what you want to put out versus what your audience wants to see. Like sometimes what we're really talking about as from like a creator standpoint is that sometimes there's a little bit of like tension there. Like sometimes you feel like what my audience wants to see isn't my authentic self. Like sometimes like you feel
Right.
like there's a piece of you that isn't showing up online, and that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. It's one of those things where it's also a business decision. And I know that some people may not want to hear that, but sometimes it's a business decision where, from a business standpoint, is there is a piece of you that unfortunately like may have to stay offline, or may have to like be on a smaller platform, or on a smaller channel. Like it not may not be meant to be monetized in that moment because it's not meant for this audience that you've built up. You may have to build up a separate audience that wants that kind of, that's searching for that content, but your core audience is your core audience, and they want what they want. And we spend a lot of time looking at our analytics, looking at the insights to know exactly what they want. So don't fight. It's almost like don't fight the
That's
system.
true. So about that audience, and I don't know if this is true. I just asked most of the creators I talk to about this. Do you ever experience negativity, negative comments, hate around your content online? And if so, how do you deal with it?
The answer to that is yes.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, I made the bold decision to cook on the internet and to cook the recipes that my grandmother taught me. And the reason why I say is bold is because the way that you might make chicken is different than the way that I might make chicken. It's different than the way that your mom taught you how to make. And so people have very, very, very strong opinions about food, especially culturally relevant food, especially foods that you're
Yes.
calling traditional. Like these are all like, it's funny because even from like an SEO perspective, like these are all things you want to include in your title. Authentic such and such recipe, traditional such and such. And so these are all things that we plug and play in the hopes that our content will perform as best as it can. Like we're giving it the best fighting chance. With it, and
Hmm.
with that, you want to attract as many eyeballs as possible. But when you do that, specifically with food, you are inviting so many people to tell you exactly how they feel, um, about it, to tell you how
What you're
it is
doing
not to.
wrong. My grandma didn't make
Mm-hmm.
it like that. We don't put
Exactly.
that in this.
Mm-hmm.
I am kind of, I would never say anything to someone online, but I
Mm-hmm.
was looking at something yesterday and they were like, this is my grandma's authentic Louisiana potato salad. And it was looking good. It was looking good. And I was like, oh, no, no, don't put that in there. But I'm like, you know what? There's a million different ways to make recipes. And
Yes.
that's why, when I was a chef, there were people would say, "Oh, do you give out your recipes?" Yeah, because you're not going to make it the same way I can. I can give you
Yeah.
the exact ingredients,
Mm-hmm.
and yours is not going to come out the same as mine.
Mm-hmm. No.
So and people get upset about that. They get, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it. And even just on recipe blogs, that's
Yes.
hilarious reading comments on
Oh
recipe
yeah.
blogs. So I guess I'm not surprised that you have experienced
Oh,
negativity.
people take it so personal. People feel very strongly, and I get it, and I totally understand it. Because just like you, I have my moments where I'm online, and somebody will say like, for example, I'm half Cuban, so for example, it'll be like uh an authentic Cuban black bean recipe, and I'll be like, oh yes, let's go. Oh, ooh. And then you're like, well, you know what? It might be a regional thing. It might be, it might be a regional thing,
Yes.
and it's, but like you said, it's like, there are people who, feel like food is very personal, and especially the foods that we grew up with. And so, they will come in and feel as though like the way that they grew up eating it or the way that they were taught is law. And,
Hmm.
and one of the ways that in the beginning it was very difficult to navigate, it would hurt my feelings. I would take it so personal. And then,
Oh,
and one of the ways that we dealt with it in the beginning is my husband and I are very different. Like, even though he's not really on camera much, like, he's very much like a who cares? Who cares? Like, tell them to
right.
turn the camera on.
Right.
Like, tell,
Hmm.
And so in the beginning, he would be the one to monitor and filter the comments so that I wouldn't see it because
Oh,
we were still in a phase where we were working on my confidence to be in front of the camera. I felt very vulnerable when we made the decision to go from like a pair of hands to really be in front of the camera. I felt very exposed. And so, I didn't have the thick skin. I was also like very much like in my mid 20s, and like I just like hadn't really like lived the life like yet. And so in the beginning that's how we dealt with it. Now, um, depending on the comment, I don't respond. I'll just delete. Sometimes they're funny. Sometimes, sometimes I rarely ever respond. And sometimes, there are, trolls are a thing. Like, sometimes they are trying to like just to get a rise out of you. Um, I
hmm, hmm.
remember, I remember when I first went onto TikTok, I felt like, I felt like it was Wild Wild West. I was like, nobody has manners. Like, what happened? Like, what's going on? I felt
Who
like it
raised
was
y'all?
exactly. I literally was, and it's funny because my sister is 15 years younger than me. She's very much like
Mm.
Gen Z, like, she's like at the core of it. And I remember she was teaching me how to use TikTok, and I literally was like, I asked her, I said, can you explain to me the culture? Because there's a disconnect. I don't understand. Because I said, all my years on YouTube, I've never experienced this type of vitriol. I said, well, what is going on? And she was like, it's just the culture. It's just what we do. And I was like, ma'am, we have the same mom. This is not what we do. Like, this is
This is not what we do.
but she,
Yeah.
even then it's like understanding like it is kind of like part of the platform, and it is like part of the culture, unfortunately. Same rules still apply. They
So,
just roll off, just roll
yes,
off, and it's
yes.
you don't pay it
It's
much mind.
just it's just a fact of life. The people who
Yeah.
make the most unproblematic content out there. I mean, I can see where
Hmm.
food can be a little bit controversial, but there are people who make very unproblematic content, and they are taken aback when the haters come for them. And it's
Hmm.
just because you're accessible.
Hmm.
You can because they can.
Hmm.
And I think the one thing my friend said yesterday when I was interviewing her, she's like, if you want to get into content creation and the thought of a negative comment sends you under the bed, then you might not want to do this because you're going to
Yes.
get the negative comments.
Yes.
But
And what's, yeah. Hmm. I was gonna say like for the longest
absolutely.
time, sorry. I was like for the longest time, I have like a separate account where I do like home DIY, renovation and decor. It's something that my husband and I have enjoyed doing for like over 10 years. And it was funny for the
Mhm.
longest time, I kept that page private. It was like my secret account. Like no one knew it was there, no one knew it existed. And it was because of the negative comments. It was because it was like, you know, what and I remember feeling like, and I remember, I can't remember who it was. It was a creator that I follow that said that some of your favorite creators never happen because they let the negative comments get to them. And I was like, that is true.
So you mentioned TikTok because I've seen you on TikTok,
Hmm.
and of course I've seen your YouTube content. Which platforms? Tell me all the platforms you're on for Chef Z Cooks,
Hmm.
and which is your favorite platform to create on, and why?
Okay, so I am on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, and I'm on Pinterest. Pinterest is my low key, oh, and my blog. Pinterest is low key
Mhm.
my like, not my sleeper, it's one of my like best performing platforms. And
Mhm.
I love the Pinterest community because it's very much tied to like the blog community. It's a different, they're so mellow, they're so
Mhm.
chill over there. Like those are my
Yes.
people. I love them. Like shout out to the Pinterest folks. Um,
Yes.
my favorite platform to create content for has to be YouTube. I'm still very much I like to take my time. I like to be able to rewind. I want to be able to really talk to the viewer and show them how to how to create the recipe, explain where the pitfalls may be. And I feel like YouTube really allows me to be able to do that. The audience has shifted. And so these days, Instagram is the place where you'll typically find me most engaged, posting the most amount of content, even producing content. Like I never thought I would see the day where the focus would shift from producing YouTube content that I would then break down into snackable content to creating custom content for Instagram and TikTok. And that's where we currently are
Mhm.
because it's where the
Mhm.
audience is, it's where the engagement is, it's where a lot of the brand activations are, it's where so while YouTube is my favorite, Instagram
Mhm.
right now is Instagram and TikTok. Instagram, I'm
Right.
still,
It's hard to
you
pick
know,
one.
my yeah, it's definitely Instagram. My sister calls me an auntie on TikTok and I said, stop. Like,
Really?
because we're still trying to figure it out, but for sure, Instagram is the big
Well,
one.
that's interesting. I didn't even think
Hmm.
about Pinterest. Pinterest is great for visual stuff. Oh,
Yes.
that's food. Where do I
Hmm.
go? Where do I go? Just today, I have I had a friend over and we had tacos or soft tacos, and I made this pineapple pico, but I
Oh,
had
nice.
too much of it. I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this? So I go over to Pinterest and
Hmm.
I'm just typing in recipes with pico de gallo. What can I put it in? I'm very visual. I need to see it, and then I can get the
Hmm.
link to the recipe or get inspiration from it.
Hmm.
But the niche that you're in, food, is big on all of these platforms. People are
Hmm.
watching YouTube videos about it. I'm getting ideas for whole recipes and meals. I have them saved. I have folders saved on Instagram. I have folders
Hmm.
saved on TikTok. I
Hmm.
have not so much blogs anymore, unless it's from
Hmm.
Pinterest, because
Hmm.
the Pinterest will typically link you back to the
Yeah.
blog. I'm a person who cooks on the fly, and I can cook, and I don't need the whole recipe. I just need the
Hmm.
idea. So if
Hmm.
I was a person who really needed to know how do I make this, I would lean more into the blogs. But short
Hmm.
form, hey, see me, let me see the steps of what you did. Oh yeah, I can do that.
Hmm.
And it's kind of it probably does a lot for the Instagram algorithm, because if it's an Instagram reel and she goes through the recipe, I'm too lazy to click over and look at her website and get the recipe. So
Hmm.
I'm standing there cooking and I'm like playing the video, letting the Instagram reel play over and over and over again. It's like, wait a minute, what was
Hmm.
that next step? So I'll probably watch that Instagram reel 20
Yeah.
times just because I'm
Hmm.
trying to, oh, wait a minute, I forgot. What else did you put in there? So I mean that's great for the algorithm. But did you ever think that this whole uh, thing about creating content about food was going to turn into a business for you?
No, I I did not think. I always thought it was going to be a hobby. I always thought that I always thought that it was going to be the launch to something else, which is still very much could be. But I always thought I didn't think it could be as big as it is. You know what I mean? Like I still
Mm-hmm.
remember when I took your master class, and I remember, my goal was, one of my goals was like I want to make six figures. Like I want to be able to like turn this business into like a six-figure business. And I remember feeling like that goal was like insurmountable. I remember feeling like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because at the time it was, the thing to be on social media was like a makeup girly, a fashion girly. It just
Mm-hmm.
felt like they were the ones that like were really taking this like social media thing and like turning it into a business that you can build a life off of. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
that's what it felt like, at the time. So I
Mm-hmm.
always felt like, you know, that it was what it was. It's what it had been for me at the time, where it was more so a portfolio that I would use to get leads, to get to other projects that, had nothing to do with social media and more so with like production. I never thought that, just me as a creator on social media could create the kind of life and generate the type of income where, where we are talking about like the growing pains of a small business, where we're talking about like scaling a business. I never thought that that would be, part of our vocabulary in reference to a social media based business that was separate from like a production company. Because that wasn't social media based. Like that was like a little bit more traditional. It was a little different, and never thought it could have the type of legs that it has. um, I'm very grateful that it does. It's a lot of work. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I always, even my sister, she wants to get into content creation, and and I make sure that she sees the hard work because, I tell her, I say, even for the people who make it as, unless you go viral for whatever reason, because, that I feel like there's a little bit of that on TikTok. Like, somebody will do a story time
Yeah.
and then all of a
Yes.
sudden they're
Yeah.
viral. And I try to tell my
Yeah.
sister, like, for those of us who are making a living off of this, that's not how it goes. It's years. You have to like work on your craft, find your audience, find your niche. You have to, figure out the pain point of what it's going to take to get you to be consistent and keep up with the creativity. And, it's a lot, it's not just like,
Mm-hmm.
and I also tell,
Mm-hmm.
don't do it to become famous either, because it's,
No.
that's not, you're gonna be disappointed quick.
Fame does not pay the bills.
No, and I have to
Sorry.
say that, you know I don't have the biggest platforms. You know what I mean? Like I don't have like some of like the largest followings, but I can say that we are building a very successful company where, like I said, like the conversations that we are having is how do we hire someone, or we need to hire someone, and
Mm-hmm.
let's tap our network, because like I'm afraid of hiring, so I know that we can, but I'm afraid for X, Y, and Z, and like let's have these conversations where someone may be able to kind of like hold our hand and coach this, because the first time it'll be easier the second time that you have to do it, but the first time is always the hardest.
Yes. It's scary. It's
Never.
hard.
Yeah, it's just like
Yeah.
never in a million years that I think that as a creator that it would bring us here. Again, very happy. It's a ton of work, and it's going to be that way. Um, but definitely excited. Definitely exciting, because
Yes.
again,
It's exciting. And you
hmm
said something just that you were telling your sister that made me want to backtrack and kind of ask you about this because
hmm
you're like, oh, you have to be consistent. That is the thing that all the creators are telling me. It's like, oh, I can't, having trouble being consistent. What is that? What does that mean to you? And then, because I'm gonna step out here on a limb and say there is no true growth without consistency. You
no,
can't get from step point A to point B without that consistency. All the creators I've been interviewing that have grown or are experiencing growth right now are just putting their heads
Yeah.
down and showing up day after day after day.
Hmm.
So, what does that consistency mean to you? And what tips can you give any creators out there who say either they haven't been consistent or they're struggling with consistency?
So number one tip I can always give is figure out what your bandwidth is and what can you do. Because I have made the mistake in the past where, and this is like I was telling my sister, like you need to figure out what needs to happen to get you to be consistent in some way, shape, or form. We all have the goal that we want to hit. For example, I personally would love to be the creator who posts twice a day on Instagram. However, my bandwidth allows me to be consistent 5 days a week. So show up 5 days a week and don't miss day five. You show up, and that's going to look different. That's going to look like something different for each creator. Don't,
Mm-hmm.
what's worse is, and again, I've made this mistake in the past where you have a stretch where you've been dark and you haven't been online for whatever reason. And then you have a backlog of content. And so then you just flood the timeline only to go dark
Yeah.
again. No, it's just like
Yes.
figure out like how can you what does that look like for you? Can you show up twice a week? Okay, so show up twice a week. Mondays and Wednesdays are your days. Okay, we have an appointment every Monday and Wednesday and we're showing up. Don't Because
Mm-hmm.
I think where consistency gets a lot of people is they see their favorite creator who's probably showing up online 7 days a week, twice a day. And they feel like,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's what I have to do. That person
Mm-hmm.
may have a team of people. That person may have
Mm-hmm.
someone just solely dedicated to posting to social media. And until we can work to get ourselves to that level, what can you do? And then just stick to that schedule. And then once you're a well oiled machine and you've worked out the kinks in your own schedule, in your own life, in your, whatever it takes for even to you to have to produce said content, to post the content, then we can talk about like, okay, how do we up it to 3 times? How do we up it to 4 times? Or whatever it needs to be. Because I also do think that each of the platforms demands something a little bit differently. I also think that for my audience specifically, they're seasonal. So right now, we're shifting. My audience is also like heavily based on the Northeast. So for
Mm-hmm.
us, summer starts this weekend. We have but like
Right.
3 months of good weather. So forget about posting on the weekends. Like everyone's outside. Everyone is outside.
Yes.
So catch them during the week. So it's just like, and if you know that, then like challenge yourself to be consistent when you know that your audience is looking for you or looking for your content. But don't bite off more than you can chew. Because again, I think that's where a lot of us get into trouble, self included, where you feel like I need to show up this many times, but realistically, you only have the bandwidth to do it maybe a third of that. And that's okay.
That's
I
great
think
advice.
the best creators have their systems in place that they know work and they execute it according to plan within the capacity that they can. It's when you're trying to kind of like overload the system that then things kind of like fall through the cracks. And then all of a sudden it's been like 3 weeks, a month, or however long, and like you haven't shown up online because you're just, and for people starting out, I get it. A lot of us, self included, we're working another job. We have kids at home. We're taking, there's a lot going on. So if that's once a week,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, fill me in. Sundays at 5 o'clock, we have an appointment. Okay, beautiful.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so because again, I think
Yeah.
it would be
Consistency is
nice.
also a habit.
Hmm.
It's a
Very
habit
much.
that you have to, a muscle you have to exercise. If you're used to
Hmm.
it, if you're, let me talk about exercise, walking. Oh, if I get
Hmm.
up, I can be on a roll if I do it every day because I'm not thinking about it. This is just what I do. I just get up and do it. But if you
Hmm.
start slacking, if you start saying, oh, well, I said I was going to film today, but I don't really feel like it. And
Hmm.
you fall off. So
Yeah.
it's a habit. It's a muscle that you have to exercise, showing up not only for your audience but for yourself
Hmm.
and for your business,
Hmm.
even before you have a business, because most of us
Hmm.
don't start off, making money on
No,
this right off the bat.
no.
But
You have
yes,
to
I
be
think that was great
disciplined.
advice.
Hmm. Thank
Disciplined.
you.
And that's
Yeah.
sometimes kind of hard for those of us who are creative. We don't
Hmm.
like being told, when to do what.
Hmm.
It's just we just like to do it when the
Yeah.
feeling hits us.
Yeah.
But if this is a business, you have to do things differently. And
Hmm.
speaking of businesses, what are your long-term goals for this? I remember what we talked about years ago when I first met you, and they may have
Hmm.
changed. So where do you hope all this content creation, food content, food business, where do you hope all of this goes in the near future that you can share with us?
I hope that we're on a path to creating like almost like a 360 location for all things like food, home, family, with the kitchen at the center of it. Like, even though like we want to evolve it into really encompassing everything that is the home, at the end of the day, the kitchen is the heart of the home. So for us, that means that food and the kitchen will always be at the heart of the home. But I'm currently finally in a season of life where I'm in my house and I have wanted nothing more than to be in my house because I want to be able to evolve the food content to the next level. For example, like tablescapes, entertainment, uh, how to prepare a menu for the holidays when you're feeding the family. What does that look like?
Mm,
You know, as far as like food prep for the week of Thanksgiving and the aftermath, you know what I mean? What does it look like? And I'm finally in a place where I'm able to film that kind of content, where I'm finally able to share that kind of content. And I think that my audience is also growing up with me. So we are, my audience is also, we're no longer
yes.
cooking in a rice cooker and a hot plate in our college dorm rooms. Like,
No.
you know, we are hosting Thanksgiving. For some of us, it's our first one. And it's like, okay, here is how to survive Thanksgiving with your in laws over for the first time. Like,
Yes.
we got this, or with July 4th, kind of, with July 4th coming up, it's, you know,
Hmm.
here is how to, for example, this is something that I'm working on. It's like, here's how to entertain for 20 people for 100, while keeping it at $10 a person. It's $200. Let's
Right.
go. We're entertaining. Let's go. Like, what does the menu look
Oh, I love
like?
that.
How are we preparing it? So that, for us, it's, I think before I had dreams of being on Food Network and,
Hmm.
being, and it's not to say that I don't anymore. I think it's changed a little bit where I just want to be like everyone's like internet, almost like Martha Stewart, or it's just like, if it has something to do with the home or the
Yes.
kitchen, like look no further, you know, we're here.
Yes.
Um, Even
And
myself,
possibly
I'm
with
sure
that
that,
cultural twist to it too,
yes,
you
yes.
know, because that's
Hmm.
something that's kind of missing.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
that idea.
Which is where, again, it's drawing from my own life and where I am right now, because it's happened to my husband and I already, where we're in the house and then all of a sudden it's like we're hosting family dinner and I'm like, okay, how do I do this in an hour and a
Hmm.
half? I have an hour and a half and I have to put together a three-course meal. Like, let's go. You know,
Hmm.
like, what can I cook that doesn't take forever to cook? What can I cook that is like balanced and, like I'm ready? Like, and it's one of those things where, again, it's just when you look online, it's not really, I don't really necessarily like see that content. And again, it's just like one of
Hmm.
those things, like my audience is growing up with me and I feel like more and more of us like are in that place. It's funny too because one of the things that I enjoy the most on Pinterest is looking for ideas on like how to set the table for the different
Yes.
holidays and things like that. And so it's just like
Hmm.
doing that in a way that's like also culturally relevant for my audience, I think would be
Yes.
really fun and really exciting. And these are all like, things that we are currently working on, that I'm
Hmm.
really excited to share. Really, really excited. I haven't felt this excited about content in a really,
Oh,
really long time. And I think it's,
that is awesome.
again, yeah, I think it's again because it's like I'm still doing what I really enjoy, which is food, but like adding that home aspect to it where the food is still at the center. And I don't feel like I'm compromising anything. And I also feel like I'm finally at a place where I do feel comfortable sharing parts of my life in that way with my audience. And like, it just feels fun. Like, it feels fun like, to be online and just be like, okay, like we have the holidays coming on. It's our marathon. Like tighten your apron. Let's go.
Oh my goodness. And your own
Mm-hmm.
home and everything. Well, Xenia, I can
Mm-hmm.
definitely see this turning into a bigger business for you because you have it. You have everything it takes to make it happen. It's just constantly continuing to grow your audience, and continuing to branch out, continuing to step a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And I can definitely see you reaching your goals really soon. And I just want
Thank
to
you.
thank you for sharing all your insights and sharing all your plans and inspiring. I know our audience is going to be inspired by hearing your story and they're going to want to find out more about you. I'm going to link all of your socials and all of the different ways that people can find you online in the description of this video. And thank you so much. I look forward to speaking with you again. And it was so great catching up with you.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you so much for having me.